Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason. As you probably already figured out, I finally got the correct U-joints in for the Firebird. The transmission is full. The rear drive shaft is installed with the right U-joints. So I'm going to start it up, let it idle for a few seconds, check the transmission fluid level, and then run it through the gears and make sure the transmission is nice and full. I fully expect to add some transmission fluid because the torque converter isn't all the way filled. A little bit of smoke, that's my oily fingerprints burning off on the exhaust. Okay, let's see where we are now. We should be in the cold operating range now. Yeah, we're close. I'm going to give it one more quart. Glenn, in case you're wondering, I traded your gallon for quarts. These are easier for me to add a little bit at a time than that big gallon jug. Okay. Yeah, now we're reading at the very bottom of the dipstick, right below the warm level. So I'm going to run it through the gears while it's up on the jack stands. Just put it into drive, let it idle up, and then put it in reverse and let it idle up. Nothing crazy. Just to put fluid through all the circuits, make sure they're full, and then I'll shut it off, let it sit, and tomorrow I'll start it up again and check the fluid and make sure it's all the way full. Alright team, so today I'm installing a brass gear kit in the headlight actuator assemblies on Glenn's Firebird. Now, I did one side already just to get a feel for it and figure out exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to show you how to do it here on the driver's side light. It's the same process, both sides, just one side is pointed the other way. Now the kit comes with some instructions, and in their instructions they instruct you to remove the entire headlight assembly, which you can do and that's fine, but then you're going to need to get your headlights realigned. You don't need to remove the entire headlight assembly, and that'll save you from having to get your headlights realigned. So the first thing you do is turn the lights on so the headlights come up. If yours are already stripped, you can use the little manual rotator here on the actual actuator motor. Once your headlights are up, disconnect the little motor electrical connector and then disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. Now you can actually get started on trying to get all the parts that you need to do this swap. So the first thing you need to do is remove this black shroud around the headlight itself. It's just held on with 4 Phillips head screws, and it's really just going to give you more space to work to get the actual motor assembly out. Once you get those 4 screws out with a little finagling, you should be able to get the plastic piece out. Now once you've got that out, you really only need to undo 3 bolts. There's a 10mm nut holding the actuator arm against the actuator shaft. You need to remove that 10mm nut, and then you'll be able to wiggle the little actuator lever off of the shaft. Once you have that off, there's 3 10mm bolts that go through the gear housing. You remove those 3 10mm bolts, and then you'll be able to actually get the actuator motor out of position. Okay, so I've got all my bolts loose. Now it's just a matter of wiggling this actuator arm off the end of the actuator shaft. There she goes. There we go. And you can get it out just like that. Boom. Okay, now we need to go over to the workbench for the next part. All right, now the next thing I'm gonna do is on the side here that's fixed to the motor, I'm gonna mark the actuator shaft so I can get it put back in the same position. Now, I didn't do that on the first motor, and it cost me some time. I had to manually energize the motor to spin it and get this little actuator arm into the correct position to match up with the headlight. And you can hear also, hear how that motor clanks around on the little actuator bracket. While you have this apart, take a punch and a small hammer and just give all those little retaining ears a little tap so that the motor is firmly attached to the little gear housing. There we go. See, no more rattle now. Now the next thing we need to do, this is the cover plate. We need to get this off. It's held in place with an epoxy. So you can take a screwdriver, flat blade screwdriver, in around the edges here and gently twist. You hear the little click is the epoxy releasing. You do that all the way around. Take your time and be careful. You don't want to break this lid. Oh, startles me every time. There we go. So you take that lid. It's very important that you not touch where it seals because we're going to be gluing that back together and the glue will not stick to grease. So now we're going to take your little gear assembly out of there. Now the motor itself has a steel gear. That's fine. This plastic gear is the one that tends to strip out and cause problems. Your kit comes with a new rubber isolator, a new brass gear, a business card, a popsicle stick, a fresh bag of epoxy, a little bag of grease, and a little parts bag. Once you have your pieces out, take your new isolator, put that into your new brass gear. And the instructions say put grease down in the 4 little holes where the shaft will engage with the rubber isolator. Take your old gear off, throw that away, you don't need that anymore. Take your new gear, it goes on in its place. The instructions say be liberal with the grease, don't be skimpy. So I've got my new piece in there. Now this one wasn't broken, so I don't need to clean any gear teeth out of there. If yours is already stripped, you'll need to clean the gear teeth out. The kit comes with this little plastic spacer. It goes on the short end of the shaft here. Give it a little dab of grease. Drop your little spacer on. And then grease your new brass gear. Don't get too carried away here, because if you have a big gob of grease on the gear, that's going to get grease on the surface that you need to seal. Once you've done that, now's the tricky part, right? We need to get our paint marks lined up and put back in place. There it is. There we go. So we got our new gear in there. Now all we need to do is glue the lid back on. Now this is fast setting epoxy. It only takes 5 minutes working time. You take your little pouch, fold it in half, cut the end off, squeeze it out onto wherever you're mixing, stir it up, give it a good mix, and then you use this to glue your lid back on. Now this stuff is super strong, so make sure you don't dribble it, make a mess, and get it all over your gears, because it's going to lock up your actuator assembly. There we go. Take your lid, put it back down in place, and take your little clamps, if you have them, and clamp that baby down just snug so your epoxy can set. There we go. So I'll leave this one for the epoxy to dry, and I'll get that one installed back in. Okay, there's one other piece in the kit that you use when you put it back together, and it's this little T-bar assembly. It's got a bushing in it. Now the bushing has a wider side and a narrower side. It installs onto your actuator like so, with the wider side towards the cover. And that's important. And once you have that in place, now you can just go bolt your actuator back into the car opposite of how you took it out. There we go. Got the passenger side back on, everything bolted up, snugged up, connected. Now the instructions say not to actually use that electric motor actuator to raise or lower the headlights for 24 hours to give the epoxy on the lid time to cure. So I'm just going to leave it as is until same time tomorrow. I am going to get the other side put back together though. One of the other things I need to do on Glenn's Firebird is get the coolant level sensor replaced. So right here is where your battery normally is. You take the battery out, and then right here behind it is your coolant level sensor. Now there should be coolant in your radiator up to this point. When you replace it, use this little wire retainer to hold it in. You undo your wire connector first. Take that wire retainer off. Let me get you a little closer. Take this wire retainer off before you remove the sensor. Have your new sensor ready. Pull this one off, put your new one in as quickly as you can. That's the best way I know to do it, and spill as little coolant as possible. If you want, you can just drain the whole system below this level, but the antifreeze, the coolant in this car is good, so I don't see any reason to do that. So we're just gonna pop the retainer clip off and swap them as quickly as we can. There we go. We've got the old coolant level sensor off, the new one in. Like I said, it's gonna spill a couple ounces of fluid, but you just swap them really quickly and it's not that bad. Make sure, it does help keep the system sealed up, so keep your cap on, keep the coolant reservoir lid on, because that'll create a vacuum and it won't allow the water, the coolant, to come out as quickly. So then you just put the battery back in. There we go, battery is back in. So I'll top off the radiator, and then I'll make sure the reservoir is at the appropriate fill level. And then that's done. Okay, it's been a few days. Let's see how these headlights work. Beautiful. Very nice. Okay, I've had the car idling for a few minutes. It's up to operating temperature. I'm going to make sure the transmission fluid is full. Perfect, right in the middle of the warm range, right where it should be. All right, everybody. Well, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. You can look forward to one more video here on the series of Glenn's Firebird. He brought me all new brakes for the car the other day. So we'll get that up in the next video, along with Glenn finally getting to drive this thing again. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. There's been a ton of new subscribers recently. Thank all of you so much. I really appreciate the support. And until the next video, take care.